In a world where penguins pay tariffs and Springsteen wants $350 for songs even he forgot about, one man dares to tell it like it is. I'm Patrick Gutfield, host of Ballot, and I'm here to break down Trump's wild tariff spree that's got Wall Street freaking out, countries threatening revenge, and yes, even Antarctic birds paying taxes. The show is called Ballot, and you should download it now, because when the world's gone mad, you might as well laugh about it. Ballot, wherever you get your shows without tariffs.
Feeling overwhelmed by negative news? 5 Good News Stories is your daily dose of what's going right in the world. Like the 103-year-old granny who got caught speeding in her sports car because she was living life to the fullest, or the family who found their missing cat after 3 years when it showed up at their vacation rental. Remember Flop the penguin's incredible comeback after his injury? And that guy who broke the world record for most high fives in 24 hours while raising money for charity? These are the stories that remind us the world is still full of wonder and joy. 5 Good News Stories. Pure positivity 3 times a week. 5 Good News Stories, available wherever you get your podcasts. 5 Good News Stories.
Calaroga Shark Media.
My name is Daniel Marsh. Last time, I told you how the fallout from the Yemen ambush began to spread through Washington. How journalist Eliza Morgan discovered evidence of compromised accounts in the Signal chat group. How Captain Santiago woke to find herself captive to professional mercenaries with an agenda far beyond a simple ambush. And how National Security Advisor Reynolds made the fateful decision to accept help from private military contractor Webb. This is Signal Lost, March 17th, 2025. Washington, D.C., 5:30 a.m. Dawn was still an hour away when Mira Patel slipped into her office at the White House. The hallways were quiet, populated only by the night shift security detail who nodded at her with the familiarity born of shared early mornings and late nights. She preferred these hours, before the chaos of the day began, when she could think without interruption. Today, she needed that clarity more than ever. She unlocked her computer with her fingerprint and navigated to a secure server, accessing documents she'd compiled over the past 48 hours. A methodical list of inconsistencies in the Signal chat, timestamps that didn't align with known whereabouts of participants, linguistic patterns that didn't match previous communications from certain officials. It was all circumstantial, fragments that hinted at infiltration without providing definitive proof. But taken together, the evidence was compelling. Someone had gained access to multiple accounts, monitoring high-level communications, and potentially impersonating senior officials. The question that had kept her awake wasn't who or how, but why. What was the purpose behind such an elaborate operation? The ambush in Yemen was devastating, but if the goal was simply to kill American soldiers, there were easier ways. This felt targeted, specific, as if the attackers had been after something particular, or someone. Captain Santiago's profile appeared on her screen. Combat record, commendations, security clearance levels. Santiago wasn't just an elite operator. She was one of a small number of field personnel with biometric access to certain classified systems. Systems that controlled drone operations, surveillance networks, and communication satellites across the Middle East theater. Mira's blood ran cold as the implications crystallized. This wasn't about killing Americans or scoring a propaganda victory. This was about capturing Santiago specifically, to gain access to those systems. Her finger hovered over the secure line to the FBI's counterintelligence division. Reynolds had ordered an internal investigation only, keeping the matter contained within the National Security Council. Going outside that boundary would be career suicide. But if she was right, American military networks were at risk of catastrophic compromise. Before she could decide, her phone buzzed with a message from Reynolds. "My office, 0600. Bring everything you have." When she arrived, Reynolds wasn't alone. Franklin Webb sat comfortably in one of the visitor chairs, looking refreshed and alert despite the early hour. His tailored suit and carefully trimmed salt and pepper beard gave him the polished appearance of what he was, a businessman who had made millions selling private military expertise to the government. Mira stiffened. Webb's presence violated every protocol for handling a potential security breach. "Sir, may I speak with you privately?" she asked Reynolds, her tone professionally neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in her head. "Webb is helping us identify the source of the breach," Reynolds replied dismissively. "He has clearance. What have you found?" Mira hesitated, weighing her options. Reynolds was her superior, but bringing an outside contractor into a live counterintelligence investigation was unprecedented and dangerous. "I've identified anomalies in the signal communications," she said carefully, revealing only what she would have included in a written report. "There's evidence suggesting multiple accounts were compromised." Webb leaned forward. "We've found the same. In fact, we've traced the initial infiltration to Director Harris's account. Someone used a sophisticated spear phishing attack to gain access approximately 72 hours before Operation Sandstorm." "And you discovered this? How?" Mira asked, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice. Webb smiled thinly. "My company provides cybersecurity services to several agencies. We detected anomalies but couldn't confirm the breach until after the fact." It was a plausible explanation, but something in Webb's demeanor raised Mira's suspicions. He was too comfortable, too prepared with answers. "The priority now is containing the damage," Reynolds interjected. "Webb's team is helping us trace the breach to its source. They have capabilities we don't." What went unsaid was that those capabilities likely operated in legal gray areas, outside the constraints that governed official investigations. "Sir, with respect, this should be handled through proper channels. The FBI's counterintelligence division is bound by rules and oversight that would slow us down," Reynolds cut her off. "We need answers now, not after weeks of interdepartmental reviews and congressional notifications." Mira recognized the argument's futility. Reynolds had made his decision, a decision that conveniently protected him from immediate scrutiny while outsourcing the investigation to a private entity he could control. "I understand, sir," she said, her expression carefully neutral. "Will that be all?" Reynolds nodded, already turning his attention back to Webb. As Mira left the office, a cold certainty settled in her stomach. Reynolds wasn't just covering his mistakes. He was actively obstructing a proper investigation. Whether from fear, arrogance, or something darker, he had compromised himself and the inquiry, which left her with an impossible choice. Follow the chain of command and watch as evidence potentially disappeared, or take the career-ending step of going outside authorized channels. As she walked back to her office, she made her decision. By 9 a.m., she had downloaded key documents to an encrypted drive and arranged to meet an old classmate from Georgetown, who now worked in the FBI's National Security Branch. Some principles outweighed career preservation. Some betrayals demanded action, regardless of the personal cost.
Want this podcast without interruptions? Caliroga Plus delivers this show and over 20 premium shows completely ad-free, right to your favorite podcast player. We've just added exciting new series including Signal Lost. What happens when the most sensitive military intelligence in the world ends up on the wrong phone? White Smoke, taking you behind the scenes of all the interesting things that happen at the Vatican. And Pager Protocol, a thriller about getting exploding pagers into the hands of the bad guys. Plus, receive all your existing favorites like Palace Intrigue about the royal family, daily comedy news, 5 daily trivia questions, and 5 good news stories. Apple Podcast users, simply tap the banner in your Apple Podcasts app that says, Uninterrupted Listening, Spotify and other players. Visit caliroga.com/plus. If you missed all that, check the links in the show notes. It's just $4.99 a month for no ads. Listen on any device, on any player you love, completely hassle-free.
In a world of smartphones and quantum computing, the fate of nations rests on technology from the past. Calaroga Shark Media presents a new podcast, Pager Protocol, a 10-part espionage thriller that will change the way audiences see the world. As an unusually large shipment of pagers makes its way to a volatile region, CIA analyst Sarah Miller grows suspicious. Meanwhile, in Zion City, Nexus Director Amos Ben David sets a daring plan in motion. Agent Eli Cohen is tasked with a mission that could determine the fate of his nation and reshape the entire region. Pager Protocol is available now wherever you get your podcasts.
In Yemen, Captain Santiago had spent 36 hours cataloging everything she could observe about her captivity. The guard rotations, 3 shifts, 2 guards per shift. The sounds that filtered through the walls, distant street noise during certain hours, suggesting they were in an urban area. The accents and languages of her captors, primarily Russian and Eastern European, with some Middle Eastern dialects mixed in. Her cell was small but not primitive. A cot with a thin mattress, a metal toilet and sink, a single light fixture in the ceiling, always on, no windows. The door was solid metal with a small observation window that opened only from outside. Her wounds had been treated professionally, stitched, bandaged, and regularly checked for infection. They wanted her healthy. That was both reassuring and terrifying. The same gray-haired man who had spoken to her earlier returned, carrying a chair and a tablet. He placed the chair opposite her cot and sat down, his posture relaxed yet alert. A professional assessing a high-value asset. "I trust you're feeling stronger today," he said, his accent less pronounced than before. "The doctor tells me you're responding well to treatment." Santiago remained silent, observing him with the same clinical detachment he showed her. "I understand your reluctance to engage," he continued, seemingly unbothered by her silence. "It's what I would expect from someone with your training, but I think you'll find cooperation is in your best interest, and that of your surviving team members." A flicker of emotion crossed Santiago's face at the mention of her team. Lieutenant Wade and Specialist Chen had both been alive when she last saw them, wounded but fighting. "Where are they?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her insides. "Near. Safe. Their condition depends largely on your decisions in the coming days." He activated the tablet and turned it to show her a video feed of 2 separate cells, each containing one of her team members. They appeared alive but injured, under guard just as she was. "What do you want?" Santiago asked, though she already knew. "Access," he replied simply. "Specifically, your biometric authentication for the CENTCOM integrated targeting network, your fingerprints, retinal scan, and voice confirmation." Santiago kept her expression neutral, but inwardly her alarm deepened. The targeting network controlled drone operations, missile systems, and tactical data distribution across the Middle East. Access would allow them to disrupt or redirect American military operations throughout the region. "That system requires multi-factor authentication from multiple authorized users," she said. "My biometrics alone are worthless." The man smiled slightly. "Perhaps once. But recent upgrades allow field commanders emergency override capabilities in case of communication disruption with command centers, a feature specifically designed for special operations teams operating in contested environments. Your credentials, combined with the authentication codes we've already acquired, would provide complete access." Santiago's mind raced. He shouldn't know that. The emergency override was classified at the highest levels, known only to a handful of commanders and the system architects. "Who are you working for?" she asked. "Does it matter?" "Nations, ideologies. These are constructs that mean little in our line of work. I serve clients who pay well for specific outcomes. Currently, those clients are interested in your military's targeting systems." "To do what?" "To introduce certain modifications. Nothing dramatic enough to be immediately detected. Small calibration errors in targeting data. Occasional communication delays. Minor glitches that could be attributed to technical failures." "That would get people killed," Santiago said flatly. "It would create strategic advantages for my clients," he corrected. "The calculus of power is rarely sentimental." Santiago leaned forward, ignoring the pain that shot through her injured shoulder. Then your calculus is missing a critical variable. I won't help you, no matter what you do to me. The man seemed neither surprised nor concerned by her refusal. As I said yesterday, personal pain is rarely the most effective persuasion technique. He tapped the tablet, splitting the screen to show her teammates again. Lieutenant Wade has a wife and infant daughter in San Diego. Specialist Chen's mother requires expensive medical care for early onset dementia. We know where they live, their routines, their vulnerabilities. Your cooperation ensures not only your colleagues' safety, but that of their families as well. The threat hung in the air between them, its implications clear. This wasn't just about her decision or her life. The consequences would extend far beyond this cell, touching people who had no part in this shadow war. I need time to think, Santiago said finally. Of course, you have until tomorrow morning. He stood, reclaiming the tablet. Consider carefully, Captain. Heroes die alone and unmourned. Pragmatists live to fight another day. After he left, Santiago lay back on her cot, the full weight of her situation crashing down on her. The choices before her were impossible: betray her country or condemn her teammates and their families to suffering. But beneath the despair, her mind continued working the problem. The man had revealed crucial information, perhaps more than he intended. They had already acquired authentication codes, which meant they had access to other parts of the system. They knew classified details about the emergency override protocols. They had intelligence on her team members' families and personal circumstances, all of which pointed to a security breach far deeper than a compromised signal chat. Someone with high-level access was feeding them information. Someone on the inside of America's military or intelligence community. She needed to escape, not just to save herself, but to warn her command about the extent of the infiltration. But with her injuries and the professional security surrounding her, escape seemed impossible. Unless her captor had made one critical mistake. By showing her the video feed of Wade and Chen, he had confirmed they were being held in the same facility. 3 assets, 3 guards per shift. If she could create a distraction, coordinate with her teammates somehow. Santiago began plotting, turning over possibilities in her mind. She would need to heal more, gather more intelligence, find a way to communicate with Wade and Chen. It would take time and patience, but time was the one resource she couldn't spare. Tomorrow morning, she would have to give her answer, and whatever she decided, people would die. Back in Washington, Eliza Morgan had reached a critical decision point in her investigation. The evidence she'd compiled painted a disturbing picture: compromised signal accounts, impersonated officials, and operational details flowing directly to whoever had orchestrated the Yemen ambush. Going public with the story would be explosive, potentially derailing rescue efforts for the captured soldiers while triggering a political earthquake in Washington. But waiting risked allowing those responsible to cover their tracks and escape accountability. She needed more. Not just evidence of the breach, but insights into the motivation behind it. Why target this specific operation? Why capture rather than kill the surviving team members? Her phone rang, a blocked number. Eliza hesitated before answering. In the past 48 hours, paranoia had become her constant companion. "Morgan," she answered cautiously. "We need to meet." The voice was female, tense, unfamiliar. "Who is this?" "Someone with information about Operation Sandstorm. Constitution Gardens by the pond. 1 hour." Before Eliza could respond, the caller hung up. It could be a trap. In the intelligence world, journalists were sometimes used as unwitting conduits for disinformation or targeted for surveillance. But it could also be a legitimate source, someone with access who had decided the truth needed to emerge. The risk was unavoidable. Eliza grabbed her coat, slipping a small recorder into the pocket along with a canister of pepper spray. In her line of work, paranoia was often just good preparation. Constitution Gardens was quiet in the late afternoon, the early spring chill keeping casual visitors away. Eliza walked the path circling the pond, her senses heightened, scanning for anyone who might be following her or waiting to make contact. She spotted a woman sitting alone on a bench, bundled in a dark coat, a scarf covering much of her face. As Eliza approached, she recognized Mira Patel, Reynolds' deputy, a key figure in the Signal chat group. "Thank you for coming," Mira said quietly as Eliza sat beside her. "I'm taking an enormous risk." "I understand," Eliza replied. "Why me?" "Your reputation. You've broken stories about national security issues before, but you've never endangered operational security or exposed sources unnecessarily." Mira's eyes continually scanned their surroundings as she spoke. "What I'm about to tell you goes far beyond a careless security breach. Lives depend on how you use this information." Eliza nodded, making no move toward her recorder. Some conversations needed to remain undocumented, at least initially. "Operation Sandstorm was compromised by design," Mira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just through Signal. The entire operation was structured to fail. The intelligence was perfect, because it was manufactured specifically to lure that team into an ambush." "For what purpose?" Eliza asked, struggling to keep her expression neutral despite the bombshell. "The team commander, Captain Santiago, has unique access credentials to critical military systems. I believe she was the target all along. Not to kill, but to capture." "Who's behind it?" Mira shook her head. "That's what I can't determine. There are digital footprints everywhere, but they lead in circles. Reynolds has brought in a private contractor, Webb, supposedly to investigate. But they're conducting the entire inquiry off the books, outside proper channels." "Webb's company had intelligence contracts supporting the operation," Eliza noted, connecting dots in her mind. "Could he be involved?" "I don't know. But Reynolds is deliberately obstructing a legitimate investigation. He's scared, not just of professional consequences, but of what might be uncovered." Mira reached into her coat and withdrew a small encrypted drive. "This contains evidence of the Signal breach, analysis of the compromised accounts, and documentation of Reynolds' actions since the ambush. It doesn't prove who's responsible, but it establishes that this was no accident or simple negligence." Eliza took the drive, immediately recognizing the magnitude of what Mira had done. This was career suicide at minimum, possibly criminal depending on the classified nature of the materials. "Why take this risk?" she asked. Mira's expression hardened. "Because American soldiers died. Because 3 more are captive, being used for God knows what purpose. And because whoever orchestrated this has people placed high enough in our government to cover it up." She stood, adjusting her scarf. "Use the information responsibly. Focus on the systemic failure, not just individual culpability. And be careful. If they realize you have this, you become a target." With that warning, Mira walked away, disappearing among the trees lining the park's edge. Eliza sat for several minutes processing the implications. The drive in her pocket was both a journalistic goldmine and a live grenade. Its contents could topple careers, trigger congressional investigations, and potentially expose a conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of government. It could also get her killed if the wrong people discovered she had it. As dusk fell over the city, multiple forces were converging. In a private office at the Pentagon, Reynolds and Webb reviewed data from their unofficial investigation, narrowing their focus to a list of potential infiltration points while carefully avoiding certain lines of inquiry that might lead back to their own actions. In a secure room at FBI headquarters, agents from the National Security Branch began quietly reviewing the information Mira had provided earlier that day, weighing how to proceed without alerting potential conspirators within the government. At the offices of the Capitol Tribune, Eliza began drafting the most carefully worded article of her career, balancing public interest against national security concerns, knowing the story would send shockwaves through Washington. And in Yemen, Captain Santiago feigned sleep while carefully working to loosen a metal strip from the frame of her cot. A crude but potentially effective weapon, if she could free it completely without being detected. All of them were operating with incomplete information, seeing only fragments of a conspiracy whose full dimensions remained hidden. All of them believed they were working to expose the truth or protect national interests, and all of them were being watched. In a nondescript office building in Maryland, Alex, the operative we glimpsed in the previous episode, monitored these developments through an array of surveillance feeds and digital intercepts. His expression remained impassive as he compiled a status report for his employers. The operation was proceeding as planned, despite minor complications. Captain Santiago remained resistant, but would likely capitulate when presented with the ultimatum tomorrow. The White House investigation had been successfully diverted into Webb's control, where it could be managed and misdirected. Only Mira Patel's actions presented a potential problem, but countermeasures were already being implemented. Alex sent his encrypted report and began preparing for the next phase. The window for extracting the authentication credentials from Santiago was narrow. Once obtained, they would need to be used immediately, before the compromise could be detected and the access revoked. The digital keys to America's most sensitive military systems were almost within reach, and when they were obtained, the true purpose of this elaborate operation would finally be revealed. It wasn't about killing Americans. It wasn't about Yemen or regional politics. It wasn't even about gaining temporary access to targeting systems. It was about something far more valuable and far more dangerous. A backdoor into the heart of American military networks that could remain undetected for years, harvesting data, manipulating operations, and undermining security in ways that might never be traced to their source. The signal chat breach had been merely the first step, a single thread in a tapestry of deception so carefully woven that even those investigating it couldn't see its full pattern. But as multiple independent investigations converged, that pattern was beginning to emerge. And when it did, no one involved, not Reynolds, not Webb, not even Alex and his employers, fully understood the forces they had set in motion. Forces that would soon spiral beyond anyone's control.
Signal Lost is a production of Calaroga Shark Media. Executive producers Mark Francis and John McDermott. The assistance of AI was used in the production of this show.
Miami. Neon dreams. Dark desires. A killer stalks the streets, turning murder into macabre art. Introducing a new limited series podcast from Calaroga Shark Media. The Artist, A Killer's Canvas. This podcast is rated R, intended for mature audiences. The Artist, A Killer's Canvas. Available on all podcast apps now.